So I think as a UX designer or just like information professional, you have to understand how information structures the world, right? How information impact people's lives. I don't really think of information as something really technical as like just what like you know dictionary entries, for example, but like information as like people's stories, and using that as almost like a method to inform how I conducted my interviews. Taking that mindset of like understanding stories as information, and then taking that method and applying that to our analysis, right? So like, how do we use stories and storytelling as a way to also convince people, right? To convince people, get buy-in. Yeah.
So I feel more like we have done like 13 hours worth of data, like interviews. So we had 13 hours of this data that we gathered in, and this is the data, right? So we actually have to go through the data and extract information and convert that information into knowledge and use that knowledge to figure out what are the most important points, themes that are going around in the data that we have collected, and then sort of like arrange it priority wise, and then try to build questions out of it, issues out of those themes, and try to build actionable recommendations that pertain to those issues, and they solve those issues directly. And they should be simple. They should be something that the client does not feel overwhelmed by, and it should sound doable in the first place. So keeping all of these aspects in mind, and another most important aspect to keep in mind while doing all of this is the attitude and how the clients are going to perceive it, the behavior of the clients, how welcoming they are to new technologies or new ideas, or what is it that they're expecting and to what extent they can change.
So I guess for me as a digital curation student, I feel like a lot of the principles that you learn at UMSI are so grand and abstract. When you think of these systems, you're always thinking about the Met or the Smithsonian or the Library of Congress. You don't think about the knowledge and history embedded in these smaller organizations that are more intimate in people's everyday lives. And so it was really interesting for me as a lover of history to really look at the kind of knowledge that is embedded into these everyday systems that we often bypass.
I was going to say, as a library student, a method that we brought to City Hall, I think, was just the art of asking particular and intricate questions. I think whenever we started this contextual inquiry process, you have to be rather intentional and mindful of the questions we ask, because the time and resources, in this case, this public service department employees, are extremely limited. And small in time. So I think when we prepared for this project, we were really intentional in the types of questions we asked to ensure we get the most valuable information we could in the most efficient time manner. Well, when it came to the engineering department, for example, we observed and analyzed their file structure. So an aspect of contextual inquiry is asking the interviewee how do they go about doing a certain thing. So in our interviews, we asked the interviewers to go about showing us how they go about creating a file structure. We asked the same questions at the people at traffic and permitting as well, and they talked us through their process when it comes to how they get information, how they categorize it, how they analyzed it, and ultimately how they uploaded it to the server or whatever platform they were using, which told us their line of thinking, and then it helped us create better workflows and better platforms for them to categorize and visualize their information, which ultimately helped us create the recommendations we were able to do.
My time as like a library and archive student, we learned that a lot of what we do is deemed as passion work. And in passion work, there's a lot of sacrifice and kind of putting the needs of the communities that you're like involved in or working with or a part of kind of ahead of the more technical processes that need to kind of be done, and that kind of gets pushed to the side, and then you want to add in that factor that you're appreciated, but there's a lack of resources at the same time. Understanding firsthand how to navigate that idea of passion work firsthand with like the City Hall folks. I mean, that's the first thing that we learned about them in our contextual inquiry interviews, that they love the work that they do. They love being able to have a direct impact and see that impact when they're out in the field and they're talking with folks. So definitely that was something that struck me.
I think librarians are often undervalued, right? And this project has shown me, my teammates have really exposed me to all of the many and vast skills that librarians are bringing. I mean, they're bringing technical skills, analytical thinking, and the soft skills that are often undervalued elsewhere, right? Outside of for a nonprofit or the public sector. So yeah, my advice would be to just trust the process and understand that for future librarians, for them to understand that they're bringing, they're very well-rounded individuals, right? They're not just they're not just versed in technical thinking, technical skills and analytical thinking, but they know people, they understand people, they're connected and in touch with communities, right, on the ground. I hope other librarians don't see these skills as not valuable or not even skills in the first place. It's very hard to connect with people. And when you have that sort of intuition to understand and connect with people, you should see that as something very valuable. And very important. So
Something I've learned during this experience that I think I'll be able to bring to my profession is that you really have to use the resources you have at your disposal. You have to be kind of creative with the community and the resources you have. Working at the city government, you realize how time is limited, resources are limited. There's just not a large maybe repository of money or other tangible asset they can dip into to come up with solutions. So with all of that in mind, when we created the recommendations, I think we were rather intentional in saying that we couldn't recommend some type of software or online platform that cost a lot of money, because that pool of money is just not there. But rather we tried to create solutions that were more tangible, that the staff members could easily use and easily incorporate into their everyday workflow. So that's something I think I will bring into my profession, is not look for maybe the most brand new idea, but try to be a little bit more innovative with the ideas and assets I have at my disposal.
I feel like I always thought what I learned before as a librarian is kind of too theoretical. But during this project, I found something we learned as a librarian actually are meaningful. What we're dealing with the government is the filing process. So what we have learned about information organization, all those taxonomy stuff, actually help us understand immediately what's wrong with their filing system. I mean, if I didn't really learn those librarian stuff, it's I know this how they organize stuff is kind of messy, but I don't know why. But yeah, learning the methodology or principle of classification as a librarian science librarian, that's what really helped in this process. But I also noticed that something we're under-trained. Maybe we are not learning enough as a librarian student. It's when we are trying to give them recommendation solutions, we cannot just focus on technically how we solve it, but also how do we convince them it is useful, and how do we utilizing all the human resources or policy to secure the implementation. So that's something we need to learn further on, I guess.
I would definitely say a piece of advice is to recognize the value of institutional knowledge as well as generational knowledge. We're moving closer and closer. I mean, we're in the digital age, but moving closer to digital as a primary means of gathering information. And a lot of that just, can't be grabbed in that way. A lot of it is just that face-to-face interview, that discussion, that contact with another person that supplies you with just that knowledge that dates back before them. So, I mean, it's valuable. It's what's going to carry forward and definitely needs to be paid attention to.
Like there are just some projects that like the folks we interviewed are working on that will span like the next 30 years, right? So it was just really interesting to be able to see like, I don't know, I guess like structural changes happening in real time, but also see where people are anticipating where these projects will go.
To see that they were all understaffed, like by a lot, and they were picking up each other's work, and they were delegating work that somebody else was supposed to do, but then there is no person in that position to do, so they're actually doing a lot of different projects at the same time. And that was kind of very interesting to see, because I didn't actually expect that, and to understand how the real world scenarios are actually very different from what we imagine them to be. So
Something interesting for me was that to see city employees be in the same department for 10, 20, 30 years, I thought that was very compelling because, I don't think that type of work exists anymore where people stay in one spot for that many years. So it was also apparent to me by their tenure at the Public Service Department is that they really believe in their work and they really have value in Lansing in particular, and they really see the positive impacts of their work. And that was very interesting to see.
The Public Service Department was almost a living archive. Like, I guess when I think of an archive, I think of something that is put away. You want to reduce physical contact with it to preserve it. But even in the things that they're trying to preserve, they're also constantly using it. And it was also really interesting for me to see them work with another memory institution, the public library, to also to continue to preserve and give access to those, relics of history as well. For example, my favorite was seeing the aerial maps. I think those are so interesting because you can just see how a space has changed over time. And I feel like that is something that a lot of people don't regularly have access to. But if that is given to the public library, they can use it, but also perhaps for the engineers, if they're looking at how sewer pipes has changed or how it needs to change or something, that document is still useful to them, even if it's from the 50s. And I think that's really cool.